evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International. On tonight's headlines. Kazakhstan's president on Friday rejected calls for talks with protesters after days of unprecedented unrest, vowing to destroy armed bandits and authorizing his forces to shoot to kill without warning. And Novak Djokovic's family has railed against the superstar's shock detention in Australia as the world tennis #1 spent the night in a Melbourne immigration detention facility. President Duterte on Thursday ordered barangay chairmen to identify those unvaccinated persons in their areas and restrain them from going outside amid a sharp rise of COVID cases in the country. And the 133rd Tournament of Roses Parade made a colorful return to Colorado in Pasadena after the pandemic. Alan and Eva Basalyahe were at the scene. First in our news, Kazakhstan's president on Friday rejected calls for talks with protesters after days of unprecedented unrest, vowing to destroy armed bandits and authorizing his forces to shoot to kill without warning. Take a look.
Данные террористические банды являются, по сути дела, международными. Они прошли серьезную подготовку за рубежом, и их нападение на Казахстан можно рассматривать и нужно рассматривать как акт агрессии.
Tokayev said Almaty had been attacked by 20,000 bandits with a clear plan of attack, coordination of actions, and high combat readiness. He also gave his special thanks to Russian President Vladimir Putin after the Moscow-dominated Collective Security Treaty Organization, or CSTO, sent troops to Kazakhstan to help quell the unrest. Long seen as one of the most stable of the ex-Soviet republics of Central Asia, energy-rich Kazakhstan is facing its biggest crisis in decades. Protesters stormed government buildings in Almaty on Wednesday and fought running battles with police and the military, with officials saying 748 security forces were wounded and 18 killed. Protests erupted over the weekend in the town of Zhanaozen in the oil-rich western Mangstau region over a New Year increase in prices for liquefied petroleum gas, which is used for cars. In other news, Australia has canceled the visa of female Czech tennis player Renata Vorakova, who entered the country to play in this month's Australian Open, according to several media on Friday. The 38-year-old player was detained by officials of the Australian Border Force, according to reports by the national broadcaster ABC, The Age newspaper, and the Sydney Morning Herald, all quoting a government source. Now, according to the reports, which could not be immediately confirmed with the Home Affairs Ministry, Vorakova was transferred to Melbourne's Park Hotel building, which now serves as a detention facility holding some 32 refugees and asylum seekers. She was reportedly told she would have to leave the country soon, but it was not known if she would mount a legal challenge, just as Novak Djokovic has done. Vorakova was believed to have entered Australia in December, claiming an exemption to COVID-19 vaccination because she had recently been infected with the virus, according to newspapers. The Australian government said Friday that a recent infection with COVID-19 virus does not mean a foreign national can enter the country without being fully vaccinated. And Novak Djokovic's family has railed against the superstar's shock detention in Australia as the world tennis #1 spent the night in a Melbourne immigration detention facility. In a series of fiery remarks, his father, Srđan Djokovic, told a crowd in Belgrade that his son was a victim of a political witch hunt and corona fascism and should be freed. Let's listen in.
Mi ne zovemo na nasilje I na ne znam šta vraćanje bilo šta bilo kome, nego samo na podršku našem Noletu. ali ne mogu nam ništa. Ne mogu nas baciti na kolena. Zapamtite!
Mr. Djokovic is not being held captive in Australia. He is free to leave at any time that he chooses to do so, and Border Force will actually facilitate that. In relation to other people who are in immigration detention, whether it be in a hotel, in Melbourne, or whether it be elsewhere in Australia, those people are there because they don't have a valid visa, or they are here illegally here in Australia for maybe a number of reasons. We treat all people who are in immigration detention fairly.
Novak Djokovic's fans rallied in the rain on Friday to protest the tennis superstar's shock detention in Australia, a development that reverberated globally and sparked an angry reaction from Serbia. About 50 protesters, a mix of tennis fans, anti-vaccine demonstrators, and immigrant rights activists congregated at a detention facility in Melbourne. Djokovic was held after arrival in Australia this week, his visa revoked for failing to meet the country's tough pandemic restrictions. Foreigners are still mostly banned from travel to Australia, and those granted entry must be fully vaccinated or have a medical exemption. Australian authorities said a 34-year-old Serbian star who has declared himself against vaccines and claimed to have an exemption provided evidence of neither and was detained pending deportation. Djokovic secured an exemption to play in the Australian Open this month, but the Australian government said he did not meet the stricter standard required to enter the country. Here in the country, President Duterte ordered barangay chairmen to identify those unvaccinated persons in their areas and restrain them from going outside amid the sharp rise of COVID-19 cases in the country. Take a look.
So, in the absence of a law, yung presidente is called upon to act. And because it is a national emergency, it is my position that we can restrain, and that I have ordered the barangay captains, because under the law, ang barangay captain can enforce all the laws of the land within his community. I'm now giving orders to the barangay captain to look for those persons who are not vaccinated and just would request them or order them, if you may, to stay put. And if he refuses, he goes out of the house and goes around in the community, or maybe wherever magpunta, he can be restrained. And if he refuses, then the barangay captain, being a personal authority, is empowered now to arrest the recalcitrant persons. That is in addition to the police power, the agents of a person in authority. Yun ang ano. And a person in authority, the barangay captain, can also mobilize civilians and adopt them as give them the task officially, probably written, and that converts their status from being a civilian, but also a person in authority called upon to assist the persons in authority. They now become agents of a person in authority. That is my position. Bahala ng, well, they can file cases. I'd be happy to answer.
Today, the country reached a grim milestone as the daily COVID cases breached the 20,000 mark after 21,890 new cases were announced by the Department of Health. And the Department of Health on Friday released a set of home quarantine guidelines for individuals positive who have been infected with the COVID-19 to keep hospitals from being congested as new infections continue to rise. Here's Health Secretary Maria Rosario Vergeire.
Bago po tayo magtungo sa mga detalye, nais lamang pong ipaalala ng Kagawaran ng Kalusugan na no test is perfect. Ngunit ang mga test natin kapag ginamit sa tamang pagkakataon at oras ay mas nakakapagbigay ng tamang impormasyon ukol sa aksyon na kailangan nating gawin. If in doubt, hindi po kailangang mag-antay ng pag-test. Isolate, isolate, isolate. Para po sa mga individual na nakakaranas ng simptomas, mataas ang posibilidad na kayo ay magkakaroon ng positive na resulta. Paalala lamang po na kayo ay dapat mag-isolate immediately para maiwasan ang pagkalat ng virus. Para naman po sa mga nagnegatibo sa antigen test, ngunit nakakaranas ng simptomas, agaran po tayo magpa-RT-PCR test upang mas makakuha ng accurate na result, pero mag-isolate na rin po tayo. Kung kayo naman po ay isang walang simptomas at na-expose kayo sa COVID-19 positive individual at nakakuha po kayo ng positibong resulta sa antigen, dapat pa rin po kayong mag-isolate agad. Sa sitwasyong ito, kayo ay likely positive with COVID-19. Kung kayo naman po ay makakakuha ng negative na result sa antigen test, kayo ay dapat munang sumailalim sa quarantine at kumuha po ng RT-PCR test sa ikalimang araw mula nung kayo po ay ma-expose. Kung kayo naman po ay hindi na-expose at hindi rin po nakakaranas ng simptomas at nag-positive sa inyong antigen test, mag-isolate po kayo immediately, magpakonsulta po sa isang healthcare professional. Kapag naman negatibo ang nakuhang resulta sa antigen test, ugaliin lamang po na susunod po tayo sa ating safety protocols or mask, ugas, iwas at airflow. Gusto rin po naming ipaalala na ang home quarantine and isolation ay pinapayagan po basta meron po kayong sariling kwarto at sariling banyo sa inyong bahay at mababantayan po kayo ng inyong local government unit or ng inyong healthcare provider. Kung kayo po ay positive at wala po kayong sariling kwarto at banyo sa inyong bahay, kayo po ay dapat dalhin sa isang accredited isolation facility upang maiwasan pang makapanghawa sa loob ng inyong tahanan. Kung kayo naman po ay positibo o may simptomas, ngunit meron po kayong sariling kwarto at banyo sa inyong tahanan, sasapat na po ang home quarantine and isolation. Paalala na ang lahat ng kasama sa bahay ay maituturing na exposed at kinoconsider na close contacts. Kapag lahat po sa bahay ang exposed at matuturing na close contact, ang mga ito ay maari na pong mag-home quarantine, particular kung walang simptomas, kung hindi senior citizens o walang comorbidity ang kasama at hindi po makakahalubilo ang ibang mga positibo. So maari na po na isang buong bahay ay makapag-quarantine kayo magkakasama kung wala po kayong senior citizen, kung walang taong may comorbidity, o kung wala pong positibo na makakahalubilo nyo sa loob ng inyong pamamahay. Ang mga taong infected at positibo sa COVID-19, may simptomas man o wala, ay kinakailangang magsagawa ng isolation, mapabakunado man o hindi. Kung positibo ngunit walang simptomas o mayroong lamang mild or moderate symptoms, kinakailangan nyo pong mag-isolate ng 10 araw, mapabakunado man or hindi. Ibig sabihin, irrespective of your vaccination status, kailangan 10 araw mag-isolate. Sa ibang pagkakataon, nakadepende pa rin ito sa magiging payo ng inyong doktor. Kung positibo at malala or critical ang naging kalagayan, kinakailangan ng isolation period ay 21 araw, irrespective of vaccination status, pero depende pa rin po sa advice ng inyong doktor, lalong-lalo na kung kayo naman po ay gagaling at mare-recover before the 21st day. Para naman po sa lahat ng exposed at posibleng magka-infeksyon, quarantine is needed. For fully vaccinated close contacts, 7-day quarantine period is advised. And for those incompletely vaccinated or partially vaccinated, yung isang dose pa lang po ang kanilang natatanggap o yung hindi pa talaga bakunado, kailangan nyo pong magsagawa ng 14 na araw na quarantine kung kayo po ay exposed sa isang positibong individual.
And new coronavirus infections in the country soared anew after 21,819 fresh cases were reported today. In its COVID-19 bulletin, the Department of Health said this raised the active case tally to 77,369 out of a total of 2,910,664 confirmed infections since the beginning of the pandemic in March 2020. The number of fresh infections on Friday exceeded the new Thursday's 17,220 new cases. Meanwhile, 973 new recoveries raised the recovery count to 2,781,424, or 95.6% of all known infections. Of these new cases, it said 99%, or 21,656 cases, occurred within December 25 to January 7, with the National Capital Region reporting the highest number of infections at 13,634, or 63%, Region 4A at 4,129, or 19%, and Region 3 at 2,084, or 10% during the said period. Another 129 new deaths were reported, bringing the country's total deaths to 51,871, or 1.78% of known infections. Meanwhile, several cities across India imposed curfews as the country witnesses a sudden spike in COVID cases driven by the Omicron variant, with health experts concerned it could once again overburden India's healthcare system. Let's listen in.
Well, India is definitely, well on its third wave of COVID, although fortunately the Omicron cases don't seem to be matched by hospitalizations or the need for ICU beds, a picture that's quite consistent with what was seen in South Africa and then also in the United States. So the only challenge that still remains is really of seeing whether the number of infections is so vast that even a small proportion of these requiring hospitalizations will still stress the system. But so far, that appears to not be the case. The Omicron variant spreads extremely easily, and I don't think lockdowns will prevent that. And in fact, even for the second wave, I don't think it was the lockdowns that prevented infections. On the contrary, it was the mass gatherings that actually exacerbated the infections. So you don't need to have lockdowns, you just need to not have mass gatherings. We probably will have variants in the future. Some years we might have a bad variant come out, some years not so bad. So anyone who thinks that we're done with COVID after this year is probably going to find that this is not the case. Just because the virus is so well established and it seems to do very well in humans. So that's the first bit of bad news in a sense. The good news, however, is that viruses do evolve to be less lethal to humans, and this virus has done that now. It doesn't mean that future variants won't be lethal to us, but at least this variant seems like it's getting out to a place where a lot of people have exposure without at least the short-term consequences. We don't know about long-term, long COVID consequences. So I think we should consider ourselves fortunate that Omicron is a mild strain, and therefore, we should hope that this protects us to some extent for a year or two. But after that, all bets are off. We don't know where this is headed.
Haunted by the specter of last year's crisis, India is bracing for a deluge of COVID cases, with authorities of various megacities bringing in restrictions in a bid to keep infections in check. Daily infections nearly tripled over 2 days this week to more than 90,000, a surge driven by the Omicron variant that some experts worry could again see the country's hospitals overwhelmed. An overnight curfew has been imposed in the Delhi area, and that includes the capital, where weekend movement restrictions will begin this evening, with all non-essential workers asked to stay home. Tech hub Bangalore has also declared a weekend curfew, while sprawling financial center Mumbai introduced a night curfew. Meanwhile, WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said during a press briefing on January 6 that while Omicron does appear to be less severe compared to Delta, especially in those vaccinated, it doesn't mean it should be categorized as mild. Let's listen in.
Last week, the highest number of COVID-19 cases were reported so far in the pandemic. And we know for certain that this is an underestimate of cases because reported numbers do not reflect the backlog of testing around the holidays, the number of positive self-tests not registered, and burdened surveillance systems that miss cases around the world. While Omicron does appear to be less severe compared to Delta, especially in those vaccinated, it does not mean it should be categorized as mild. Just like previous variants, Omicron is hospitalizing people and it's killing people. In fact, the tsunami of cases is so huge and quick that it is overwhelming health systems around the world. Hospitals are becoming overcrowded and understaffed, which further results in preventable deaths from not only COVID-19, but other diseases and injuries where patients cannot receive timely care. First-generation vaccines may not stop all infections and transmission, but they remain highly effective in reducing hospitalization and death from this virus.
Having the context of confirmed cases being put in quarantine or quarantining at home is really critical to prevent the onward spread. Now, we know that that is very difficult to do. We know that that takes effort. People need to be able to not work and be supported in not work, be supported in quarantine to make sure that they can provide for their family, that they have food, et cetera, et cetera. And that is not a small matter.
For every day you reduce the quarantine, a small proportion of people will go on to develop symptoms and potentially affect others. But you could say that's 14 days or 40 days, and you can go into a very long period. So this is a trade-off. The science gives you a range, and that range peaks, I think, at about 5 or 6 days, and then falls off exponentially. So based on a country's need, based on the economy, based on the availability of teachers, health workers and others, based on the availability of tests, countries have flexibility within that to set the periods of quarantine that meet their goals.
Dr. Tedros called upon citizens of the world, including civil society, scientists, business leaders, economists, teachers, to demand that governments, pharmaceutical companies, to share health tools globally, bring an end to the death destruction of this pandemic. He also stressed that we need vaccine equity, treatment equity, test equity, and health equity. Meanwhile, 4 Hong Kong lawmakers and the city's immigration czar joined another top official at a quarantine camp as the coronavirus scare widened today, ensnaring political elite after they attended a large birthday party. It was held to celebrate the birthday of Whitman Hung, a member of China's top lawmaking body, according to local media. Now, Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam has said she was very disappointed in this large gathering of officials. Take a look.
One of the pieces of advice is to avoid mass gatherings and to avoid taking off your mask and to avoid taking photos without mask on when you were in such an occasion. My colleagues apparently have not taken the advice of the Secretary for Food and Health. So how could they set a good example for the people of Hong Kong? We have done our internal investigation to identify as many as possible those colleagues who have attended the occasion, and hence I could share with you this list of 10 officials altogether.
The latest high-profile entries into Hong Kong's 21-day quarantine facilities have left city authorities red-faced as they install a new Patriots-only legislature, which is scheduled to hold its first meeting next Wednesday. And they are joining Home Affairs Secretary Gaspard Tsui, who was sent to the camp Thursday after being deemed a close contact with a potential carrier. And by Friday, he was joined by 4 other lawmakers and Immigration Chief Au Ka Wang, all of whom had attended a birthday party Monday at a tapas restaurant. I offer my sincere apology to all people of Hong Kong. I have reflected on this incident and shall be more vigilant in the future, according to Au in a statement on Friday. He added he was at the restaurant for a short time and left immediately after congratulating, quote, my friend without having a meal sitting down. Officials separately confirmed the lawmakers sent to the quarantine facility will miss the start of the legislative term. And Argentina surpassed 100,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in a single day for the first time, breaking its record high since the start of the pandemic for the third day running. The country, which since the end of 2021 has been facing a dizzying rise in COVID infections, is now one of the countries in Latin America where the disease is progressing most rapidly. With testing centers overwhelmed by the spread of the Omicron variant, 109,608 new cases and 40 deaths were recorded in the last 24 hours, according to their government data. Health Minister Carla Vizotti has urged people who are in close contact with a sick person but have no symptoms to isolate themselves and avoid going to testing centers, given the long lines seen outside testing sites across the country. And meanwhile, a series of coronavirus outbreaks have cropped up on cruise ships in North and South America, Europe, and Asia, despite strict health measures, giving new headaches to the pandemic-hit sector. In Brazil, cruises were suspended until January 21, while the Association of Liners and authorities work out differences over health protocols following infections on ships on New Year's Eve. Cruise trips had only resumed operating in November in Brazil. Meanwhile, Brazilian health authorities are investigating reports of COVID protocol violations after local media reported that passengers aboard one ship broke quarantine to join a New Year's Eve party. In Europe, a cruise ship docked in the Italian port of Genoa this week to let 45 infected passengers disembark, while others who tested positive on board were isolated in cabins with balconies to be left off at later ports of call. A trip on another ship from Spain to the Canary Islands was cut short, forcing some 3,000 people to disembark in Lisbon following an outbreak. In India, more than 2,000 people traveling from Mumbai to Goa were prevented from disembarking after 66 cases were detected on board. And in Hong Kong, Royal Caribbean Spectrum of the Seas, a vessel carrying 3,700 people, was ordered back to port on Wednesday for testing after 9 people were found to be close contacts in an Omicron variant outbreak. Last week, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention urged Americans to avoid cruise travel, even if they are vaccinated, after more than 5,000 cases were detected in U.S. waters in the last 2 weeks of 2021. Now, going now to Canada, where Ontario has updated its restrictions after a surge of cases due to the highly transmissible variant of Omicron. Here's Ashley Sakmar for the report.
This past Wednesday, January 5th, Ontario, Canada returned back to Step 2 of reopening, a long-term plan that the province had set in 2021 to slowly transition back to normal. However, after the recent extreme rise in COVID-19 cases within the province, Ontario is once again reducing the limit capacity and closing indoor access to many public places. Most of Ontario's public space limit is currently at 50% capacity, with no indoor access to places such as restaurants, cinemas, museums, gyms, and the like. All public and private schools will move to online learning, awaiting further updates from the province's Ministry of Education. Since July 16, 2021, Ontario was in Stage 3 of the plan to reopen, In October last year, officials had released the full plan with a projected vision of lifting all limits by March 2022. However, the plan to exit stage 3 of reopening came to a halt in November, which continued on throughout December after the arrival of the Omicron variant in Ontario and the extreme rise in cases during the winter months. Evolving data shows that the Omicron variant may be less severe than prior strains. However, with 30 mutations in its spike protein, it is proving to be a highly transmissible variant even amongst those who are fully vaccinated. The rise of cases escalated quickly during this past holiday season, and as of Monday this week, the total number of active cases in Ontario is 130,307, with Omicron being the most frequent variant in the province. In Toronto, Ashley Sackmar, Eagle News, we live in interesting times.
Thank you, Ashley. Eagle News International will be right back.
Hindi po kami makapag-evacuate kasi halos naunang tumumba lahat, mga puno.
So pahirapan talaga ng mga ATM ngayon.
Nagtaka ako bakit biglang gumaganon ba. Yun pala, sinundan ako ng yero.
Hindi na po bali ang bahay. Basta nakaligtas lang po ang pamilya namin.
Hindi rin po namin alam kung saan kami mag-uumpisa. Basta ang alam namin, nagsisikap kaming bumangon.
Pagsubok man yun, alam ko makayanan namin.
Welcome back. Japan moved ahead with an expansion of support to U.S. troops as the allies held top-level talks on Friday over tensions with China and North Korea. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced the two nations were signing a 5-year extension of the support package provided by Japan for the hosting of around 50,000 U.S. troops on its soil. Let's listen in.
Our alliance has never been more crucial to realizing a shared vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific. And in my judgment, at least, it's never been stronger. The alliance needs to be to meet the challenges that we face today. China and Russia continue to violate international norms on land, at sea, in space, in cyberspace. The DPRK's unlawful nuclear and missile programs pose an ongoing threat. And we saw that again this week with the most recent launch. These aggressive actions threaten the rules-based international order that both of us have invested a lot in. And it's provided the foundation for peace, for security, for prosperity, for people in both of our countries and around the world.
not only in ensuring the security of both Japan and the United States, but also in maintaining rules-based, free and open international order and ensuring regional peace, stability, and prosperity, it is more important than ever that Japan and the US are united and exhibit leadership as both nations share strategic interests and universal values.
Now, Tokyo pays the costs of the U.S. forces in the country as well as utilities. A previous agreement was set to expire in March 2021, but was extended for a year around a change of administration in Washington. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, as you can see here, appearing from isolation after a mild case of COVID-19, said the allies were evolving our roles and missions to reflect Japan's growing ability to contribute to regional peace and stability. Japan renounced its right to wage war after World War II and has since developed a close alliance with Washington, which is treaty-bound to defend the world's third largest economy. According to the Foreign Ministry, the new 5-year package will amount to 211 billion yen or 1.8 billion US dollars per fiscal year, an increase of about 5%. And the package comes amid growing tensions with China, which has stepped up incursions near Taiwan, a self-ruling democracy that enjoys close ties with Washington and Tokyo, but which Beijing considers a province awaiting reunification. To the U.S. now, President Joe Biden savaged Donald Trump's lies and attempt to overturn the 2020 election, vowing on the first anniversary of the January 6th Capitol riot that he would let no one put a dagger at the throat of democracy. After largely ignoring Trump for a year, Biden took off the gloves, describing the Republican as a cheat whose ego wouldn't let him accept defeat and whose supporters almost shattered U.S. democracy when they stormed Congress to prevent certification of the election. And members of the House of Representatives held a moment of silence for the officers who died defending the building that day. Take a look.
Mr. President, how are you feeling about the day, sir?
Praying that we'll never have another day like we had years ago today.
I want to acknowledge our fallen heroes of that day. U.S. Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick, U.S. Capitol Police Officer Howard Livingood, Metropolitan Officer Jeffrey Smith, U.S. Capitol Police Officer Billy Evans of a later assault. Now I ask all members to rise for a moment of silence in their memory.
And here's the truth. The former President of the United States of America has created and spread a web of lies about the 2020 election. He's done so because he values power over principle, because he sees his own interest as more important than his country's interest, than America's interest. I did not seek this fight brought to this Capitol 1 year ago today, but I will not shrink from it either. I will stand in this breach. I will defend this nation, and I will allow no one to place a dagger at the throat of democracy. We will make sure the will of the people is heard, that the ballot prevails, not violence, that authority in this nation will always be peacefully transferred.
We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol. And we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
Now, the party's top lawmaker, Senator Mitch McConnell, was leading a delegation to a funeral of a recently deceased senator some 600 miles away in Atlanta, Georgia. In a statement, McConnell said January 6 had been a dark day, but called it stunning to see some Washington Democrats try to exploit this anniversary. McConnell was among the senior Republicans a year ago who condemned Trump for stoking the unprecedented violence. Now, one top Republican, House Minority Whip Steve Scalise, said Democrats want this to be politicized and they want every day to be about January 6. In other news, following the announcement by Hong Kong's government banning for 2 weeks all flights from 8 countries, including the Philippines, the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration, or OWA, said that the agency is now closely monitoring the situation of overseas Filipino workers who might be stranded due to the flight ban. During the Laging Handa briefing, OWA Administrator Hans Kakdak said the OWA is now preparing food, accommodation, and transportations for OFWs. Take a look.
Well, binabantayan natin ngayon sa airport yung mga posibleng maapektuhan kasi ng mga nakaraang karanasan, nakikita na natin na nasa stranded sila. At although in general, ang mga recruitment agencies are very cooperative at have the resources to help yung mga magiging stranded sa airport, hindi matutuloy yung flights, etc. Pero meron tayo kasi yung mga balik manggagawa, yung wala na sa recruitment agency arrangements, kusang loob na lang nanunumbalik sa kanilang employer. Sila yung malamang natutulungan natin. Kung wala silang matutuluyan dito sa Maynila, kung taga-probinsya sila, taga-ibang regions, ay tutulungan natin sila magkaroon ng shelter, of course, food and accommodations yan, na ibibigay natin sa kanila. At assistance na rin ng transport from the airport at kung saan man nila gusto magpahatid. So nakahanda tayo ngayon na tulungan yung mga posibleng ma-stranded gawa nitong restrictions sa Hong Kong.
Now, Hong Kong authorities announced a 2-week ban on flights from the United States and 7 other countries, including the Philippines, as the city attempts to stem an emerging Omicron outbreak. Now to Britain now, where it will deploy troops to hospitals in London to alleviate severe staff shortages caused by the Omicron outbreak, according to the Ministry of Defense today. Around 200 armed forces personnel will join health workers in the capital, which has been particularly badly hit by the recent upsurge in COVID cases, leading to mass staff absences in hospitals. The deployment will include 40 military medics and 160 general duty personnel, according to the ministry. Britain on Tuesday recorded 218,724 daily cases of the virus, the highest figure since the pandemic started. Although deaths and patients requiring ventilators have remained steady, the sheer number of health staff testing positive for the virus and having to self-isolate is putting pressure on the system. Prime Minister Boris Johnson on Tuesday said hospitals were on a war footing due to staff shortages, with many hospital groups declaring critical incidents because of the threat to crucial services. A curfew, a ban on private gatherings, and a delayed return to school greets Quebecers as the new year begins. As Eagle News correspondent Andre Lajoie tells us, the province put these measures in effect to protect a hospital network that is near the breaking point because of the Omicron variant. Andre.
In the latest restriction came into effect New Year's Eve in the province of Quebec, a nightly curfew is in effect from 10 p.m. until 5 a.m. Travel will be only permitted in healthcare humanitarian visas or work considered a priority. Violators face fines in between $1,000 and $6,000. Private gatherings are limited to just one household, although a single person can join a family bubble. Classrooms in the province will remain closed until at least January 17. Quebecers woke up on New Year's Day to news that more than 17,000 new cases of COVID have been reported. That's the highest number since the beginning of the pandemic almost 2 years ago. Quebec Premier François Legault is hoping his latest measures will slow the spread of the virus. Faced with more COVID patients in hospital in the coming weeks, Legault is pleading with healthcare workers who have left the profession to return. And that help is going to be needed. more than 250 people were admitted to hospitals, bringing the hospitalization to 1,161. Public health officials fear hospitalizations could range between 1,600 and 2,100 in as little as 3 weeks, a level that will cripple the healthcare system. Legault warns that many cases could result in a situation where the system would no longer be able to treat everyone in the province. I, Andre Lajoie, Eagle News International in Montreal, Canada.
Thank you, Andre. Meanwhile, heavy snowfall hit Tokyo and surrounding areas on Thursday, grounding flights and delaying trains, while more than 50 people were taken to hospitals in the capital after slipping and falling due to snow on the streets, according to authorities. Now, Kyodo News Agency reported that central Tokyo observed 10 centimeters of snow accumulation in the evening, a level unseen over the past 4 years. The Japan Meteorological Agency issued a warning of heavy snowfall in the 23 wards of the capital, also the first since January 2018. The warning was also issued in Chiba and Ibaraki prefectures, while the agency called attention to heavy snow in the other areas on the Pacific coast, which usually see less snow than the Sea of Japan side. Yokohama in Kanagawa prefecture and the city of Chiba recorded 8 centimeters and 7 centimeters of accumulated snow by 7 p.m. respectively, while Saitama City saw 2 centimeters by 6 p.m. At least 52 people were taken to hospitals in Tokyo and 24 were injured in Saitama Prefecture, including an 84-year-old man who broke his leg after falling when he was riding a bicycle. That's according to local authorities. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. May lalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Welcome back. Fitness tech industry boomed during the pandemic, and the market is estimated to be $4.5 billion in the U.S. this year, according to an analyst from the Consumer Electronic Association at the CES, where dozens of sport-at-home companies flourish. Take a look.
pandemic locked us inside, right? We couldn't go outside, we couldn't do the things that we loved, right? But the human body still needs cardiovascular activity. It's quite simple. You just need a really engaging way to get that cardiovascular activity and to release that sort of, the sort of energy that builds up in you because you've been sitting down for so long. A big part of going to the gym together is sort of suffering together. It's like you experience pain, you work really hard, and you sweat, and so do the people around you, and you build a camaraderie around that. And now that we don't share that space, at least in real time, we have to do it virtually, right?
And you start talking to each other. And then all of a sudden, you have a group of maybe 6 guys, from all over the world. A guys in London, a guys out in California, a guys down in Florida, and you have this community,
Fitness tech devices will be a $4.5 billion market in the US this year. And there's a growing group of people who are engaging with these devices in their home. They want connectivity. They want to engage with other people online. And this is helping people, incentivize them to keep fit and to just engage with other people.
And the 133rd Tournament of Roses Parade made a colorful return in Pasadena after last year's event was canceled because of the pandemic. Here's Alan and Eva Basilyaje. They were at the scene. Take a look.
2022 has finally arrived, and what better place to greet the new year than at the 133rd Rose Parade presented by Honda.
And what better way to kick off the celebration than with a performance by Grammy Award-winning artist and Masked Singer Season 4 winner, Leanne Rimes.
The Masked Singer, they got a float parked right around the corner.
Making the 5.5-mile route down Colorado Boulevard are equestrian units.
Over a dozen of them.
Marching bands.
Over a dozen of them.
And floats.
Over 24 of them. And speaking of, one of the float designers shares his insight about the science and artistry involved in the float making process.
Designing Rose Parade floats is like a relay race, and I'm the first one out of the gate with the design. Then it goes to our welders, our engineer, to make sure that the whole thing can be built. It's carpenters, floral designers who figure out all the colors I chose. What is it in nature that they can use to match those colors? And on top of that, they add texture to the float. Every surface has to be covered with natural materials. That's part of the rules. Another rule, too, for the Pasadena Rose Parade is all the floats have to have roses on them somewhere. So we make sure that all of our floats, the roses are predominant on the float. It's not just designing a float, but we're designing a show since it's a parade. And so we like to have entertainment that goes along with the floats. So that's part of the design as well. Very often it may be dancers accompanying the floats, or singers sometimes, or just people that are important on the float that are waving to everyone along Colorado Boulevard. I believe that I stopped growing up at 12 years old. To design a float out of nothing, it's like experiencing life as a child. Everything's new and it's the first time. So when I create a float, it's the first time. And using bright colors and friendly shapes and friendly flowers, people can't help but be moved in good ways. It's the same experience as visiting a theme park. It's bright. It's not something you see every day. So it makes it a very unique experience to see a parade, whether it's on television or even better up close in person.
This year's parade theme is Dream, Believe, Achieve, referencing the power and importance of education.
And just what are some of the dreams that people have for themselves or for the world that they believe they can and will achieve.
We hear from attendees about this and about all other matters pertaining to the Rose Parade.
I grew up watching the Rose Parade on television, and it's just surreal to be here in person and have the opportunity to see the floats live and cheer on our team.
Actually, I'm visiting my brother, and it's been like over 8 years since I'm here. And this is my first time in Rose Parade. For me, it's like once in a lifetime. I'm a visitor here, so it is excited rather than watching from TV, right?
Yeah, this is the first time we've ever been here to Pasadena in general, first time Rose Parade. It was really incredible. It was an incredible experience.
Ohio State has been selected to play in the game and come into the Rose Bowl, and the Rose Parade has been on my bucket list for a really long time. Ohio State is definitely going to win today.
Our daughter was supposed to perform last year, but they didn't have it, so this year is going to be awesome.
We've been decorating the floats since our kids were in baby strollers, so since our kids were in kindergarten. And now we both have, our first kids are in college and our other kids are in high school. And it's my first time being at the parade, so I've watched it on TV my whole life. And now my son is in one of the marching bands.
Marching bands provides an opportunity for students to show all the hard work that they do for their instruments. It provides a lot of excitement and joy for all of the parade goers. The music gets everybody going along the parade route.
One of the best things that we saw actually was, I think, one of our drum majors on BandFest Day. It's pouring down rain, which it never does in Southern California. Thankfully, we've got a good day for it today. But one of our drum majors was still standing there and just, finishes up the particular tune that they're on and just has this giant grin on his face. He's so happy to be there. He's so excited. That's what they all do. They're so fired up for this kind of thing. This is what they love, and it's just amazing to see. I think my favorite one was, there was one with an ostrich on it, and the ostrich was flying. I thought it was really cute. I like animals, so.
I think to really understand the feeling you get by being here versus at home watching is you get to experience the energy of all the people from local, sometimes around the world. And it's this really great energy that everybody's really positive and happy to be together, be here.
Being here in person is completely different from watching it on TV. There's a lot of people like camping out as we walked. Before we got into the stand area, there were a lot of people sleeping out, camping out on the sidewalks overnight. Here, the energy is just electric. And once the floats start, you can really smell the roses on those floats. Cannot smell the roses on TV.
I loved when I heard the thing was dream, believe, achieve. It's something for you in a lifetime, a continuum, whether you're in grade school, middle school, high school, college, and beyond, and retirement. I dream. I'm recently lost my mom, who was 101 several months ago, and this is a chance for me, having been her caregiver for a lot of years, to start a new dream, to believe and achieve.
Big dream of mine that I think we can achieve, like, as a world, is kind of just like re-implementing love into like the foundation of society, because like I feel like we look around the world and there's so much discourse and stuff, but like there can be discourse as long as you have love under it, because without the love, it's just going to be like fighting and bickering all the time.
Kindness is a big thing, just basic kindness. You don't see a lot of that now, just that like basic kindness and understanding for people and a genuine care. So that's kind of a dream of mine.
The dream is like, especially for the children, like they come here and then they get inspired. They're looking at their friends, their peers, and the adults, and then it just gives them encouragement to be brave, to know that they can reach whatever they dream on.
Rolling into a new year just marks a new opportunity for us to re-engage, to address our goals, and really to come back together as a community. I think we've been so fragmented because of the pandemic. It's good to start putting that behind us and to come together, and I think the world is in desperate need of that now, more so than ever before. So we look forward to an incredible 22 and wish your viewers the same.
I echo that sentiment.
As the final float disappears from view, our team is suddenly reminded that Eva spent the majority of last night composing a short but heartfelt greeting just for our viewers. So, what do you have to say?
Happy New Year, everybody.
Well, sometimes the classics really are the best. In Pasadena, California, Eva and Alan, Eagle News, we live in interesting times.
Thanks, guys. And as always, I'll end the day on a thoughtful note. Challenges may often come our way, but sometimes it takes a good fall to know where we really stand. And this has been Eagle News International. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay alert and stay informed because we live in interesting times. Good night.